fact, the Auditor General's report once again raising the concerns about the lack of alignment in government systems when it comes to preventing mismanagement of public funds. On an annual basis, the AG reports gross irregularities under the watch of national, provincial and local structures. Well, 2020 has seen some of the distribution of funds being squandered. Joining us now for this conversation tonight is Sakhumzi Somyo, who is the chairperson of the Standing Committee on the Auditor General. Good evening and thank you so much for your time tonight. As you've been reflecting and I suppose also trying to get through the second phase of this COVID-19 report, what have been your impressions of it, and do you feel that we're in a better state perhaps this time around than we were when of course the late Gimi Makwetu was making or giving us this update?
Well, in the first instance, let's appreciate that the Office of the Auditor General has met its preconceived timing in as far as the release of the report is concerned. And we must, indeed, as you make reference, this is a second installment of such a report, which comes with a very mixed bag of issues. In the first instance, if you notice that the first report was a bit harsh on the areas that relate to preventative controls, which sought to indicate that government departments have carried through this period the similar deficiencies as would have been discovered in the normal audit processes, which is a very bit hurtful because they had to spend in a very short space of time huge amounts of funds and in an environment which was a bit relaxed through the measures of procurement. So if you look into the current report, you'll find out that those matters which were of reference previously, let's take the reference in as far as the UIF is concerned as one example, that one of the topical matters there was a matter that referred to payments to individuals which were not necessarily eligible for such payments. Such things do still continue, though there have been recoveries which have been made as a result of the first report, which are going beyond 3 billion rand. And one element which was supposed to have been done by such a unit was to look into their post-approval instruments, where they ought to make such assessment as to whether such amounts have gone into deserving individuals. That process is still lagging behind. That work has not been done as of the end of September, in as far as this audit report is concerned, something which is a bit concerning because we thought that some of such indications which are looking into some kind of deficiencies would be quicker to be implemented. But if you go to social development as another example, because they are both big spenders in this time around, you'll find out that there has been a great improvement there, great improvement in relation to the identified lackluster environment, which has been tightened up. And those individuals which were identified as not supposed to be deserving have for some time been held up in a package area, which has somewhat assisted to improve the payment time, the payment accuracy, and the deserving individuals somewhat, which is very critical point for us, which we ought to somewhat encourage. The third area which we must look into is on the PPEs. There, the area which was impacting on the ability of government to have spent quite adequately following measures which have been outlined by Treasury in terms of pricing, in terms of identification of service providers. You'd still find out there are still some of those elements in terms of identification of service providers, as well as looking into the quality aspect of the PPEs and the level thereof of supply of such required materials, which is something which I think government would have to tighten itself up in looking into those areas. And you would want to have another look in as far as the grant funding, which was meant for either sectors like tourism, sports, SMMEs. Even there, you have a mixed bag of findings, where in some areas you'll find out that that process became a bit easier, but in some instances like tourism, you'd find out that there's been a consistent change in as far as a policy to be followed in terms of distribution of such, and therefore that put the department at a risk and exposure on the fraudulent exercises in terms of such claims made by people who are not supposed to be. The same happened in as far as sports is concerned, where you would find out that in terms of this audit, there is confirmation that there are certain institutions or individuals which are going to about 280 something, who have received questionable amounts, which ought to be followed somewhat. So it tells you that yes, indeed, some accounting officers had to yield the required results in terms of observing the previous observation by the Office of the Auditor General, and some have somewhat had some lackluster approach in terms of such findings, something which we really would frown upon, as we would have to discuss and probe further in as far as the report and the individuals affected are concerned. Thank you very much, Kathy.
All right, Sakhumzi Somyo there giving us the view of the Standing Committee on the Auditor General, and he's the chairperson of that particular committee.